Aloha and welcome to our Understanding Populations and Communities video. In this video, the goals will be to identify the levels of organization in life, describe how populations are measured, identify properties of communities, and finally we'll describe different interactions amongst organisms in those communities. So when we're talking about populations and communities, we have levels of organization. These levels range from the organism itself, an individual living thing, all the way up to the biosphere, which is all the areas of the earth where life exists. So from an organism, several organisms living together are going to form a population. Several populations living together will form a community. A community, several communities will form the ecosystem, and if we take all the ecosystems together, that gives us what a biosphere is. So we'll learn a little bit more about this as you go through the lessons, but I just wanted you to see these levels of organization. Now, when we're talking about populations, there's several different things we want to look at. Probably the easiest and the simplest one is the size. Quite simply is how many, what are the numbers? How many individuals are in this population that we're seeing? What are the limits of the population? Are we defining it as a range? Are we defining it by numbers? How are we doing that? That gives us all the idea of population size. Once we know the population size, we can find out the density, and that kind of tells us how many individuals are in a given representative amount of space. So when we talk about human population density, we'll notice that in cities, it's a lot greater than it is out in the country where you can spread out a little bit more. Now, also, there's some other terms that you'll hear about. Niche. Niche is kind of like the role an organism plays or a population plays in the ecosystem. It's its job. It's where it lives, what it eats, what it does. All of that falls into its niche. You'll also hear a lot about stability. And stability is how resistant to change that population is going to be, or that ecosystem is going to be. If it has high stability, that means that there's not a whole lot going on that's going to cause it to change quickly or change at all. Whereas if there's not a lot of stability, then we'll see a lot of fluctuations and changes. And then finally, we talk a little bit about species diversity. How many different numbers of species are there? That's one way to look at it. But also within the species, what kind of diversity do we see amongst the individuals of that species? Now, because the species are living, they're going to have some interactions. And some of the easiest ones that we know are like predation. And that's quite simply who eats what. That would be our predatory relationships or predatory interactions. We also have some for competition for resources, and those resources will be like food, water, shelter, the basic needs for living things. Then we get into a funny little term down here called symbiosis. And symbiosis is when we have organisms working together for the benefit of at least one of them. And how they benefit is how we define these. We can have parasitism, and parasitism is where one organism feeds off the other. One organism benefits, the other one's actually harmed from this. And our example would be like fleas. Fleas are parasitic because they feed off of dogs. Dogs get no benefit for the fleas, and in fact, dogs can get sick because of it. Now, we can also have mutualism. In mutualism, that's where both of them are going to benefit. So an example of this one here would be like a bird sitting on the back of a grazing cow. As the cow is going through, the bird's picking off the parasites and picking off the bugs off of the cow. So the cow benefits by not having those, and the bird is benefiting because here it has this magnet for its food. So that's one of the ways that we can kind of see this mutualism where they both benefit. And then the third type of symbiotic relationship is going to be commensalism, and that's where one benefits and the other one has no clue it's there. And a good example of that would be barnacles on a whale. The whale is so big, the barnacles don't do anything to the whale, it doesn't even know they're there, but because the whale's swimming through the ocean, it allows the barnacle to send out its feeding appendages, and it can feed in a much more efficient and a way because it's happily traveling through the water as opposed to sedimentary and just stuck on the rocks. So we can see that these interactions, we have our common ones, our predation and competition, and then we talked about the three kinds of symbiosis, how they relate to each other. And all living things in these ecosystems are going to be interrelated. They're going to interact with each other. Okay, so that's it for this video. As always, good luck with the lessons. They'll go into a little more detail for you, and we'll see you in the next video.